But ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, I'm really honored to be here to take part in tonight's celebration. A celebration of citizenship and also a celebration and a commemorate of the people who serve with distinction of Canada. People who, at the time when they decided to go to war, they were helping a country that did not even recognize them as one of their own. And those people, of course, I'm referring to the veterans of Army, Navy, and Air Force of the Pacific Unit number 280. Ladies and gentlemen, would you like to join me to give a round of applause again to the veterans? I'd like to read you a passage. I'd like you to listen to this carefully. The passage goes like this. For here in Canada, I want the marble to remain the marble, the granite to remain the granite, the oak to remain the oak, and out of these elements, I would build a nation, great among the nations of the world. That sounds like multiculturalism to me. You probably would agree. Do you know who said those words? Those words were uttered in 1903 by then Prime Minister Sir Wilfrid Laurier. Multiculturalism, 1903. Unfortunately, in those days, multiculturalism did not include Chinese Canadians. Chinese in those days had to suffer. Chinese had to pay head tax. And in 1923, Chinese were totally excluded to come into Canada through the Chinese Immigration Act. Let me read you another paragraph. This paragraph goes, Canada is a garden into which has been transplanted the hardiest and brightest flowers of many lands, each retaining in its new environment the best qualities for which it was loved and prized in the native land. That sounds like multiculturalism again to me. Do you know who said those words? Those words were uttered in 1961 by the Right Honorable John Stephen Baker. Those words, actually they mean something. Because by 1961, Douglas Jung had been in the House of Commons. Douglas Jung, a Chinese Canadian, had represented Canada as Canada's chief delegate to the United Nations. Multiculturalism as a state policy was actually put into place in Canada in 1971 by then Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Furthermore, in the year 1988, the Canadian Multiculturalism Act was actually put into as law. And Canada, in a Western country, is the first country ever that put state policy multiculturalism into an act of law, into something that we all have to obey. And in our Charters of Rights and Freedom, in Section 17, it is actually written into our Charter that the Charter shall be interpreted in a manner consistent with the preservation and enhancement of the multicultural heritage of Canadians. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you see, Canada has a really long history of multiculturalism, and it is a part of the Canadian fabric. But what does it all mean to all of us, particularly those of us who are members of the so-called multicultural communities? People like myself, people like the majority of the people here in the audience, who are visible minorities. What does that mean? I want to just emphasize two of the policies that are stated in our multiculturalism, Act of Multiculturalism. Item number C in the Act says, promote the full and equitable participation of individuals and communities of all origins in the continuing evolution and shaping of all aspects of Canadian society, and the elimination of any barriers to the participation. Now let's stop and think a little bit about it. It says it has to promote the full and equitable participation of individuals, individually as well as collectively as communities, in shaping of all aspects of the Canadian society. So it is the entire change, evolution of the country that in an act of parliament encourage everyone, particularly those people who are from the multicultural communities, to participate, to help change, to help participate in the evolution of the society. Another section, section F, it says, encourage, and it says, the social, cultural, economic, and political institutions of Canada to be respectful and inclusive of Canada's multicultural character. There are two key words in here, respect and inclusive of all Canadian institutions, be it social, be it cultural, and be it economical, and be it political. Now let's look at those. Take a look at how we've been successful. And indeed, in the same act in 1980, not only it asked those different institutions, but it charged every single department, every single crown corporations of Canadian government to be leaders, to promote multiculturalism and to implement those policies. Now let's take a look. The act was actually written in 1988. Parliament actually were charged to have a report on an annual basis of the Multiculturalism Act. So ladies and gentlemen, I will submit to you that yes, Canada has a proud history of being multiculturalism. Canada has enacted being the first country to put multiculturalism together, but I don't know exactly how far we have gone. And in 1996, the government of the day actually did a study and refocused multiculturalism into three areas. They want to focus on, the first one is social justice, want to build a fair and equitable society. They want to focus, number two, on civic education, or participation in the shaping of our communities and countries. And number three, identity. To recognize, to respect, and to reflect the multicultural heritage of Canadians. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the first time the word identity was mentioned in the same sentence as multiculturalism. Canadians were looking at a Canadian identity. What does it mean to be a Canadian? People are looking at the policy of multiculturalism, and people are saying that perhaps, just perhaps, this state policy of multiculturalism is becoming divisive. It's dividing Canadians because it emphasizes what is different rather than what is in common. Indeed, an author wrote a book. The book is called Selling Illusions, the Code of Multiculturalism. And he argued that multiculturalism policy actually produced a psychology of separation in the ethno-cultural community. That people are forming their own communities and they're sitting together in their own little enclaves. They don't want to intermingle with other people. Other authors, such as Richard Gwynne and Jack Granolson, they maintain that under multiculturalism, Canadians become strangers in their own land. That certainly is not something that any one of us want to see happen. But has it really happened? Does those arguments really have merit? And I think those arguments is based on ignorance as much as in misunderstanding. Their point of view is not much different than when a member of parliament spoke in the House of Commons in 1975. I shall not mention his name. Who says, this is 1975, who says that Asians are imposing a great social burden in this country. Chinese people who cannot be absorbed properly into the country and who cannot find jobs suitable to them are being admitted under the Immigration Act. Those people are coming in so rapidly that they are not fitting in properly to the fabric of society. They are locating in ghettos, dozens in a time. They come in plain loads, 350 at a time, and there is just no way to assimilate them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is 1975, and those words were uttered in the House of Commons. Time has changed, but it hasn't really changed fast enough. But if we were to move forward, go forward quicker, go forward faster, and when Chinese Canadians actually to start mingling and interacting and expressing themselves more, people get to know the Chinese Canadian value more. People get to know what the Chinese values all stands for. So come to the present day, where our Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, recently remarks that he believes that the values held most strongly by our Chinese community are truly Canadian values. The values that have, that are, and that will make us a successful nation if they guide the decisions of governments. What a change from 1975 to the present day. But the challenge, though, to all of us is to make sure that Canadian values, we have to communicate it to the newly arrived Chinese Canadians as well. Chinese communities, members of the Chinese Canadian community, has a duty to also communicate their values to the general public. So I believe that we need to strengthen our education system to teach Canadian values such as equity, due process of the law, and fairness to our children, to our new Canadians who landed in our shores. And I think that we need to include the teaching of the Canadian values in the citizenship process. If you look at today, people who want to become a Canadian citizens, the tests that they take basically talk about the geography of Canada, talk about the basic Rights and Freedoms Act, but it really does not touch upon what are the values of Canada, what are the values of this country, and how different is it with their value from where they come, or how common is it from the value of the country that they come to. People did not agree with our values, but it's important, though, that they know what are our values, so that they can become fully functioning, understanding, and be part of our society. And furthermore, I believe that we need to do more cross-cultural promotion. Right now, if you look at the kind of festival that we held, basically it's one ethnic group celebrating their own heritage, their culture, another group celebrating it. I think it's important that we have crossed the line. We need to cross the line. We need to have the Indo-Canadians celebrating Vaisakhi, but asking the Chinese to participate in it, asking the non-Chinese, the European people participate in it, so that they become truly then part of the Canadian identity. Because you look at Canadian identity, you look at Canadian culture. Culture, for one thing, is not static. Culture has to be dynamic. Canadian culture is evolving. The Chinese culture here is different from the Chinese culture in China, different from the Chinese culture in Hong Kong, because it is a Canadian Chinese culture. And we have to do more cross-cultural promotion. And I also believe that political leaders and government bodies, they have to be more reflective of our multicultural society. And I will submit to you that the reflection is not a reflection of the skin color. I don't subscribe to to the fact that if you put a Chinese person in there or put an Indo-Canadian there, that should be it. That's inclusive. I don't subscribe to that. I believe the importance, though, is a reflection of values, of the different point of views. If someone who's grew up in Hong Kong, and they could be an Indo-Canadian, they could be a European, but if they grew up, educated in Hong Kong or in China, know the Chinese system, know the Chinese value system, that person can adequately represent the Chinese point of view. And that would make us a stronger country, and that is an important part of it, not so much only a color skin. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I think the best way to pay tribute to the veterans of Unit 280 and to all those men and women who fought for the value of Canada, who fought and who suffered, is for us to continue to fight to ensure that we're all equal and proud Canadians. Citizenship is a relatively new right given to Chinese Canadians, and it should not be taken for granted. Citizenship should be fully celebrated, and the struggles of the past, which brought us to this point, remembered. If the leaps and bounds of the cultural understanding and equality that was made in the last century are any indication of what is to come, I look forward to the next century. Perhaps there will come a time when Chinese Canadians will no longer be distinguished ethnically, but will be recognized as unhyphenated Canadians.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chan. That is very well spoken. We appreciate those very, appropriate comments.
Pause for a moment. To the fallen.